Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Megan and today I have a very exciting video. If you read the title, you already know we are doing a recap of Fourth Wing. I reread this and took extensive notes so that I could give you guys the most efficient and best recap I could in anticipation of Onyx Storm coming out in about a week and a half. I'm very excited and I know you guys are as well. I am a rereader, but I know some of you aren't. So I wanted to create this recap for all of you who don't like to reread in preparation for Onyx Storm. And I'm not gonna talk much longer because I know you guys want this recap, so we're just gonna get straight into it. First up, I wanted to start with some history, some backstory and context behind this book we're about to travel into. And disclaimer, this is the history from what we know from Violet's point of view heading into the book. First of all, the continent is home to two kingdoms. 400 years ago, these kingdoms got into a war, and our two kingdoms are Navarre and Poromiel. Navarre is the larger kingdom and home to our main character, Violet Sorrengail, and it holds 6 provinces within it. Poromiel is the enemy kingdom, the smaller kingdom, and is home to the Griffin Riders. This war went on for centuries. But 200 years ago, a trade agreement was made for the Trade Agreement of Resin, allowing the two kingdoms to barter and trade 4 times a year. This allowed Navarre to exchange their lumber and livestock in exchange for Poromiel's cloth goods and agriculture. This happens 4 times a year at the outpost of Eighthbine in the city of Resin. However, from what we know at this point in time, Poromiel is greedy and wants more, so they've been attacking Navarre in order to try to obtain more from us. Zooming into more recent years, we are looking specifically at Tyrrendor. Tyrrendor is the southernmost province of Navarre and borders the Poromiel kingdom. A little over 6 years ago, there was a rebellion, or as the Tyrrendors call it, the apostasy, and this was led by the great betrayer, Finn Ryerson. This rebellion led to them being known as the Separatists, and they were aiding the enemy during this time. On July 1st, this is the day known as the Battle of Eredia. This is the day that the Separatists lost at Eredia, and Eredia was burned to the ground. The Treaty of Eredia was formed, and we now celebrate this as Reunification Day. And another important note is that this is also the day that Brennan, Violet's older brother, passed away. Following the battle, the Separatists were executed and their children were forced to watch. The dragons then marked all of the Separatist children with a relic, and this deemed them the marked ones. They are now known throughout the kingdom and are easily identifiable by these relics. So now that we have all that backstory, let's go ahead and get into the story and what actually happened. So we start off right away. We meet Violet Sorrengail. She has trained her whole life to be a scribe under her father. However, after her father's untimely death 2 years ago, her mother forced her to start training for the Writer's Quadrant. The story enters with Violet entering her mother's office and making her last plea, her last-ditch effort to try to join the scribes instead. Mira, her sister, is a lieutenant in the Writers and also shows up and makes the plea with her. However, they are both denied by her mother and she is forced to join the Writers. Mira then takes Violet aside and helps her prepare for the parapet. And this is the first challenge that our writer hopefuls must pass in order to become a cadet. So, in order to prepare Violet for this test, Mira braids her hair. She has long hair, which we find out is gray due to a illness that her mother had while she was in the womb that sort of drained Violet of her color and her strength and gives her this like graying edges or silver edges. And then she also has a lot of trouble with her like joints and ligaments and bones. They're very frail. We know this in our world as Ehlers-Danlos disease, but obviously a fantasy book is not going to name it that. So Mira braids her hair, she helps her repack her bag. We do see a lot of like sentimental books removed from the pack for Violet, and one of them is a folklore book that her father had passed on to her. So her pack is significantly lighter. Mira has given her new boots, a new hairstyle, and also armor made of dragon scales, and she warns Violet during this time to steer clear of Xaden Ryerson. So as Violet is waiting in this parapet line, we meet Rhiannon and Dylan, who are cadet hopefuls as well. In this conversation, Violet sees that Rhiannon is wearing very soft-soled boots, so she convinces Rhiannon to trade a single boot with her. That way she has a better chance of getting across. As she's about to cross, she comes across Xaden Ryerson, and he is the son of the great betrayer from the Separatist Rebellion. And of course he's the most attractive man she's ever laid eyes on. So it's Violet's turn now, and she crosses the parapet. During this time, she is reciting historical facts to keep her focus, and behind her she sees Jack Barlow enter. He is a ruthless, bloodthirsty cadet hopeful that has taken it as his personal mission to rid the wing of weak ones, and Violet is unfortunately his next target. She just barely makes it and has him literally by his balls, both physically and mentally, through reading the rules to him that he cannot take her out, and this causes a very initial tension, rift, conflict between these two. After she crosses and escapes from Jack, we meet Dane Atos, her best friend from childhood. He takes her under his wing into his squad along with Rhiannon as well, and as we are gathering the formation of the wings, there's first, second, third, fourth wing, and they are initially in second wing, but Xaden is the wing leader of fourth wing and sees this, doesn't allow it, and switches her to fourth wing under his supervision. During Battle Brief, which is their daily class to kind of go over what's happening at the front, we are introduced to the idea that the wards, the things that power the dragon's magic and protect Navarre from Peromiel, are starting to fail. They head to sparring, and Violet is sent into her first challenge, which is a challenge against Imogen, who is one of the marked ones. She actually tries to kill Violet during this very first sparring match, but thankfully Violet is wearing that dragon scale armor and is protected, so Imogen settles for just breaking her arm and ripping it right out of its socket. When Violet is healed and gets back to her room, she goes to lay down and finds a book hidden under her pillow. She pulls it out and discovers it's the Book of Brennan, gifted to her by Mira, a book or journal that Brennan wrote during his time in the Quadrant with tips and tricks on how to survive. This actually led to her being able to find out who she's going to be challenged with in the sparring matches ahead of time, allowing her to go on this midnight escapade of poison ingredient collecting. During this midnight escapade, she overhears and oversees under her tree a gathering of the marked ones. So we get our first Xaden and Violet interaction in the Writer's Quadrant during this scene, and Violet agrees to keep secret about this meeting that she has overseen, and in exchange, Xaden now owes her a favor. Violet goes on her poisoning spree then and ends up winning several different rounds until one day she accidentally miscalculates the timing on a poisoning and sends her challenger to the healer's wing too early, and no one is there to step in her place until Xaden steps in and ends up disarming Violet on the mat in front of everyone, but they also have this like really unique vulnerable moment in this time. After all these rounds of sparring, we move on to the Gauntlet, which is essentially this huge obstacle course. It's a vertical obstacle course built into the side of a cliff face, and at the top of the cliff is the flight fields, and the only way they can make it to presentation is by ascending this obstacle course. In the first day of training, Violet ends up mastering the first 3 obstacles out of 5, but keeps getting stuck at the chimney type obstacle where you have to go up in an X because her arms and legs literally aren't long enough. She's too short for this obstacle. So the gauntlet eventually happens, and Violet has been staying awake, brainstorming, coming up with what she can do. She ends up ascending the chimney by using the rope, and then uses a dagger to ascend the last obstacle, much to the dismay and outrage of Amber, another wing leader. Xaden ends up allowing it, and they head into presentation. During this presentation, we spot a golden feather tail, which has never been seen. After presentation, some time passes, and on October 1st, as it always is, October 1st is always threshing, Violet is out on the flight field. She's looking for her dragon. She's having a lot of trouble. There's really no bond or tug that she's feeling in any particular direction. However, she ends up overhearing Jack, Tynan, and Orin on the hunt for the golden feather tail. It's a 3-on-1 attack, and Violet hits Jack right in the shoulder and causes him to turn and run. And then Orin, she knocks out. During this time, Xaden's about to step in. He's watching, he's narrating, but a black dragon ends up landing behind her and scorching Tynan where he stands. And he ends up bonding with her. So Violet goes with this dragon back to the flight field and announces that she has bonded with Tern. And also, to everyone's absolute shock, and including Violet's, also the golden feather tail that she had protected, named Andarna. The whole field goes into an uproar at this point, and everyone's fighting about if she should have this dragon or not, but it ends up being up to the dragons. And while they're gone, his dragon and her dragon are a mated pair, and so now their lives are tied together. If she dies, that will cause her dragon to die, which causes his dragon to die, which causes him to die. So now they are bonded. And Xaden has also taken it upon himself during this time to assign Imogen to help her with weightlifting and strength training so that she can continue to excel and he can continue to watch his back. We also get to meet new squad members, and because Violet's squad had the most members retained since the parapet, they were known as the Iron Squad and kept their squad intact, and then just added members of other squads. So we get to keep Rhiannon and Rhydock and Sawyer and Violet together. Also at this time, we start to see signets manifesting. Signets are the unique power that is created between the dragon and the rider, and the unbonded are on the hunt, specifically for Violet because she has the coolest dragon in the whole school, let's be honest. So because the unbonded are on the hunt, they come after Violet in her sleep. And during this time, Tern wakes her up and alerts Xaden. He's on his way, but he almost doesn't make it in time, allowing Andarna's gift to kind of come through. And she stops time for 30 seconds and escapes, and Xaden takes out everyone. And we learn that Andarna is a feathertail, and a feathertail is actually a baby dragon, not its own species. And they have the ability to gift their magic directly to the rider. Xaden and Violet decide to keep this a secret to protect Andarna, and Xaden confronts her about what happened. Violet ends up telling him, and thankfully he believes her, and Amber, the wing leader, is put on trial and she is put to death. Liam and Violet have library duty together the next morning, and we learn more about Liam's backstory. We learn that he was fostered alongside Xaden. We also learn that he was separated from his sister during this time. Violet stands up for herself finally against Jack and Dane without losing her temper, and the dragons decide that she is finally ready to channel. It manifests that night and kind of takes over her emotions because Tern forgot to block her during his midnight escapades with Scale, and she's feeling a lot of things. She runs out of her room trying to get as far away from anyone as possible so she doesn't make any mistakes, and ends up running into Xaden. He teaches her to block, and they also share their first kiss. Next, Jack is finally able to challenge Violet. Thankfully, she saw it coming and is prepared and uses oranges, which he is allergic to, as a weapon. Months go by and squad battles are happening, and the final battle is actually a kind of strategic leadership challenge to work as a unit to obtain the artifact that would aid the enemy most against them. And Violet's squad ends up breaking into her mother's office and stealing the map off the wall. For this, they are able to go to an outpost as their prize, and the outpost they end up at is, of course, Mira, her sister's outpost. During this time, Xaden and Violet and also their dragons have been separated, and we learn that the dragons can only be apart for 3 days. We also see Xaden use mind talk on Violet for the first time, like using their dragon's bond to talk to each other, which is really fun. The outpost is attacked and griffins are swarming. A couple months later, Violet's signet has still not manifested, but war games are happening. And war games is essentially kind of like a capture the flag-esque game. Before the war games start, we see a saddle on Tarn. Xaden has finally cashed in his favor, and he made a saddle for Violet to be able to stay in her seat during flying. During the games, Violet ends up finding where the egg is, and they go into an immediate battle. Jack almost takes out Liam, and Violet ends up using Andarna's gift in order to save him. During this time, she is feeling so angry and so in search of revenge that her signet ends up manifesting, and it's in the form of lightning, which she uses to take out Jack. A month or so later, we see Reunification Day, which is the anniversary of the Battle of Reread, which is also the anniversary of both her brother's death as well as all the Separatist kids, or the Separatist execution. But they do have the king in town, and he's hosting a party, and Violet ends up going. Liam goes as her bodyguard, and once she kind of realizes what the day is, they escape the party, and Violet goes in search of Xaden. She ends up finding him on the parapet, and she goes out and finally confesses that she's ready to risk her heart, even if he's not willing to admit that he wants her yet. She's ready for it, and they head back to his room and do some more, way more than kissing, and are interrupted to be informed that the school is under attack. The attack ends up being war games. Each wing leader is given an HQ or headquarters at a specific outpost. Xaden is assigned to 8th Bind, and he ends up pulling Liam, Imogen, and Violet from her squad. So on the way to the outpost, they stop for a break, and Violet learns the absolute betrayal that Xaden has been aiding the enemy. She also starts to hear them talking about venom, and she's like, whoa, venom are real? When they get to the headquarters outpost, they find a missive that is essentially saying this is actually a trap and it's a test of your loyalty. The Venom are attacking this village, and they head in. Violet starts to realize that the Separatists were killed for trying to expose this truth, whereas her family and her kingdom let her brother die in order to keep it secret. The battle continues, and we get one of the saddest deaths I've ever read in a book. Dee's fighting for their life as they are fighting this wyvern, and unfortunately lose, and Liam, because a rider will die without their dragon, because I'm gonna cry, because Dee passed away. Liam unfortunately passed away, and some of his last words were, "It's been my honor." So Xaden and Violet are on the warpath. Venom ends up getting on Tarn's back and starts attacking Violet, and she realizes that she is at a huge disadvantage. Xaden ends up helping her out and leveling the battlefield by casting a shadow over Tarn's back, and she uses her lightning to disorient the Venom and stab her. Unfortunately, during this attack, Violet was also stabbed by a poison blade, and it has black blood oozing out of her side. When the venom falls, so do several wyvern, and Violet realizes what Liam was trying to say when he said like take out the venom. The venom are directly tied to them, and just like when a rider dies because of their dragon, the wyvern die because of their riders as well. So Violet uses Andarna's gift to specifically target the most powerful rider and takes that venom out, and then Xaden takes out the last one with a shadow lasso that he pulls down straight into the blade. I'm like, where was that this whole time, you guys? But Violet is absolutely depleted. She ends up falling from Tarn's back. After she falls, she is obviously caught by Andarna and given into Xaden's care until the final chapter, which is Xaden's point of view. And in his point of view, he's sitting there just living in this absolute guilt about everything. And finally Violet wakes up, and we learn that they're actually at Reread, which, although it was burned, has been in the process of being rebuilt secretly under Xaden's care. And we learn that she doesn't learn, but we, from Xaden's point of view, learn that Andarna has grown exponentially from her previous size. And finally, and most importantly, we learn that Violet's brother Brennan is still alive and there's a rebellion. So that's our recap. Quite long, but there was a lot going on in this book, but I did want to end with some notes and things to think about. 1, her mother is a storm wielder, and it just so happens that the storm that's happening and the rain that's happening gets worse right as she's crossing the parapet, and then suddenly kind of dies off as she's finishing the parapet. Suspicious. When Xaden and Violet run into Violet's mother and Dane's father on their way to a flight lesson, it is kind of revealed that Violet's father was doing some research on feathertails, and while Violet didn't admit it at the time, she does know where her father's notes are. So what else was he doing research on that we don't know about? And finally, in Xaden's point of view, he says that he's like been missing the love of his father, and then he says, and his mother. Don't even get him started on that. So what happened with his mother? Obviously, take all these with a grain of salt. I don't know where they're going or what they mean, and we'll discuss further after I read Iron Flame. That was the video for today. I hope this helped you guys kind of recap going into Iron Flame and then eventually into Onyx Storm. So stay tuned for the Iron Flame video, and I'll see you next time. Bye, friends.